Hello, everybody. It's Phil the Issues Guy here with Joe Dirty Locks and Katie's as well over on his side. We're about to do a Vikings podcast here on Friday, February 27th. We just got some bad news that I think affects us all and affects. So we just kind of want to get out here, not a lot of hype, not a lot of build up for a show, and just talk a few seconds about the death of Leonard Nimoy. Well, not so much about the death because he was 83 years old. He's lived a great life. As Katie said before we started, we were lucky enough to get him see him play Spock two more times in the J.J. Abrams films. No matter what we thought about that, getting to see him play Spock again was a very amazing thing that meant a lot to me, as well as seeing him on Star Trek: The Next Generation in his episode that he was on there as well. But he just meant so much to me growing up in the sense of he symbolized what Star Trek was to me. If it wasn't for him, a lot of people can say Kirk this, Kirk that. When the show first started, Spock was the selling point. Those ears were so cutting edge, and he was the guy that really pushed that show and was the artist that kept pushing that program to keep growing in itself. And then it led on to that where he directed Star Trek 4 and 3 and 4 and just continued to grow as a director. A small trivial thing that means a lot to me that might not mean a lot to a lot of people. Three Men and a Baby. He directed that movie, and that was one of my all-time favorite movies growing up as a kid, partially because of my obsession with Steve Guttenberg. But
Nice.
I guess I just want to say it's sad. It is very sad he passed away today at 83. He had talked a lot about how he'd been sick for a while, so this is something that, especially when he got said that he got brought into the hospital yesterday, it's something that we might have all seen coming. But I think we should take this moment now to say goodbye to him, but take a moment also and celebrate all the awesome shit that he did. Somewhere right now, he is with this guy right here. You can't see his face because it's in the sun. DeForest Kelly. And he's arguing. DeForest is saying, "You green-blooded Vulcan scumbag, sit down at my table and let's have a shot." So, or at least I hope that's.
I got to say this, for whatever it's worth, he had such an influence on, my generation as a whole. Everything, you hear a lot about Shatner and Shatner being the huge influence of sci-fi that he, and rightfully is, but, a lot of people really identified with Spock, loved that character, loved the way he played it. Many other roles that he played, jobs that he did, like you said, director of Three Men and a Baby, behind the scenes.
He was also on a show called like Amazing Stories, or he was on episodes of The Twilight Zone. He popped up in. I mean, during that period of time around Star Trek and right before, he was everywhere. And he's also originally from the Massachusetts area. He went to school around here. He's a alum from this area. I don't know. I'm a little emotional.
He's a masshole.
He's a masshole. He really is. And that's always been a big part of his personality, too, being very fiery. It may not seem it with his calm demeanor, but him and Shatner used to get into a lot of arguments, and DeForest Kelly was the person in between that was sort of the voice of reason to both of them because they both had such huge egos.
My first Trek convention, he was a speaker on a panel. It was a long ass time ago at the Heinz, I believe. Could be wrong, but you know, I'm upset. I was glad he was in the last couple of Star Trek movies. One last shebang. Maybe is there another one coming out? Is he in the one coming out?
I don't
know. A line. Maybe they'll put him in on like a monitor somewhere in the background, or digitally, or some crap like that. Help me, Obi-Wan. You're my only hope. Type shit.
I hope so. And I also.
Hologram.
It's getting sad to the point where we're getting to that point in time where a lot of the original cast members are getting to that age, and it's Joe said it a couple of times, and we keep kind of repeating the same point, but it's important. When I think of Star Trek, I close my eyes, and yes, I'm a huge Deep Space Nine fan. I love Jean-Luc Picard, I love Data, and I really do love Kirk. But to me, when I think of Star Trek, I think of three things. I think of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and two of those men have passed at this point, and Shatner's still Shatnering everywhere. And,
for what it's worth too, when I think Star Trek, the first thing that goes through my head is that cast, and it basically works forward. Like I think them, I think Next Generation, I think Deep Space Nine, I try
Yeah,
not
those
to
other
think
ones we're not
Voyager
going
at
to.
all, and then Enterprise is such a disappointment to me because I thought so much more could happen. But the universe is huge. Gene Roddenberry and other people, and the original people that worked on this were just, they were visionaries.
Yeah, and Leonard Nimoy more than anybody had so much to do with the crafting of the Vulcan race, of the personality of what a Vulcan is. I mean, that's something else that we could go into at extreme lengths, but the whole concept of logical, as we connected in the call and Joe couldn't even hear me, I could hear Katie and Joe talking about, oh, logical this. Just the whole expression. No one can say the word logic without thinking of Leonard Nimoy. You just can't do it. It's just part of the lexicon of who we are now as a world that we're that affected by everything Leonard Nimoy brought to that character. He is
Yep.
just it's easy to overlook it because it's a different age, but in the age of theater coming into television, Leonard Nimoy more than anybody else helped bridge that gap and really create one of the first completely iconic television characters. And I'm not just doing hyperbole. I would have said this 3 weeks ago too, when he was still alive and you didn't know he was sick. Spock is one if not the most important influential science fiction characters and television characters ever created. You could look from a science fiction standpoint and I'd put him up there with people like Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, the little you don't want to do that, Dave. The voice of Hal from
Well, let's think about this. How many? I'm not exactly positive, but I'm not sure how many aliens there were on TV in a
there were
constant role at the time.
there were a couple of people that tried things, but nothing took off till Spock came on to the point where women found him sexy, men wanted to be him. They all wanted the ears. They all like he
Like
just
there were other aliens. There were other shows that featured aliens, but like this was one that was on every week. He was there. He was a role, a supporting cast member, star of the show. I don't know how many times that had been done before. Like maybe like something, but
it really
I'm
hadn't
not sure, not too many.
It really hadn't, Joe. It was completely unique to the situation. And we have a couple people writing saying it's so sad, so sad. Yes, it is. It's very sad.
Yeah.
And I think we've been treading on this too. Joe made a really good point there that that Leonard Nimoy wasn't just so important on Star Trek. It was important to make alien species and looking at things in a different way and being accepted to be as a character and a focal point of the cast. And let's just go to Star Trek as a whole. You wouldn't have Romulans, you wouldn't have any other Vulcans. You could say, from a standpoint like on Taxi, when you had Andy Kaufman and then you had Laka's wife, I forget her name, but she based her whole character around the way Andy Kaufman created the character of Laka. Every Vulcan and every Romulan was
Pretty much created around Spock.
created around Spock. Yeah, he was the initial point that kind of that the impetus, the Big Bang, you could call it, that created. Sorry.
Yeah, he set the score. He set
Rock,
the score on how that character is going to be throughout the Star Trek universe. And Kirk kind of did the same thing. And to an extent, you could say, oh, well, Jean-Luc, he was a completely different kind of captain than Kirk. Yes, but when it came down to it, you put Picard on an away mission, he's kicking some alien ass too.
But it's also I also want to mention I also want to mention, and it's safe to say that Spock was on the show before Kirk ever was too. The pilot episode, which had Captain Pike, featured Spock. Spock was one of the few people that got carried over from the original pilot into Kirk's first episode.
Well, and you knew that was no matter what, that character that was a main staple character. You were gonna have the United color of Benetton represented, and you were gonna have fucking an alien race.
Did you know originally Spock was supposed to be red, but they screen tested it like that, and it came off on the screen as being like way too dark and weird looking, and Leonard Nimoy argued heavily to make the character not that color, so that's why they made him sort of like
A bluish green.
Or have like a sort of weird tone to him.
Greenish, yeah. I like, ultimately whatever they did right. they did right to get the show off the ground, to get it a couple of seasons, and ultimately major motion picture, and then the freaking universe that it is. Like,
And again,
there's all, there's the Kiss Army, there were Beatle fans, and then there's fucking Trekkies, and they're everywhere, and like
Trekkies and Star Trek fans, like different
Yeah.
terminology for different types of Star Trek.
Exactly.
It's a whole,
Yep.
like,
No, look, I mean, I'm a Deep Space Nine fan. People that are into Next Generation more than the original Trek call themselves Trekkers, not Trekkies.
yeah.
So there's like a big divide in the whole subculture, and that all comes from and I mean, we're giving a lot to Leonard Nimoy too, but yeah, I would say it all comes from the first star of Star Trek, which was Leonard Nimoy. He
Yep.
pursued it. He was the Lassie of the show. In Threat to Say Another Thing, he was why people tuned in every week. They tuned in to see those weird alien ears, to see the Vulcan neck pinch, to see my.
One of the best parts of the show, you even hit on it, was his relationship with Bones and with Kirk. And at the end of every episode, there being a little back and forth for Kirk to roll his eyes over between Bones and Spock. I used to love those little exchanges. And then as much as they frustrated the hell out of each other, how much they loved each other anyway, as much as the Vulcan could.
Yep.
So to speak,
And
it's human
half,
half anyway.
half human Vulcan, so he's had it inside him. And the last thing I guess to say,
Yeah. The depth of the character. Oh,
the death of the character in Star Trek 2 was so intense and so well played. I think he brought, being a Shakespearean actor, and Shatner was too, he brought so much talent, so much gravitas into Star Trek, and he was so much of a big responsibility of creating things like the neck pinch, like the mind meld. If you haven't had a chance, he has 2 books, one called I Am Not Spock and one called I Am Spock, that talk about his experience through Star Trek. I've read both of them. One came out closer to after he was done with it all and trying to separate himself, so it's a little bit more antagonistic. The second book came out a few years later, and it's a little bit more focused on talking about the whole process of Star Trek. You can find
but I loved his parenting books the best.
Dr. Spock. That's why he did. Yo, that's why he did 3 Men and a Baby.
Now it all makes sense.
Ah!
Oh.
It's all connected now. But he just brought so much to that character as a person, and so much humanity to a non-human character. And
Yeah, of
we
course.
could go on and on. We're going to definitely, I've talked a little bit before about doing some more Star Trek videos, and we'll definitely, Joe and I will both, and Gotti I know will want to get on here at some point as well. We will be touching in a little bit more here and there about our feelings of Leonard Nimoy and Star Trek as a whole, because it's a big part of our fandom of television, or at least it is for me, and I know it is sci-fi is for Joe as well. So maybe
That's my original fantasy stuff was sci-fi, I believe.
Mhm.
I mean, there was fantasy movies and stuff that I had seen, but the first things that left a lasting impression were Star Trek, Star Wars. For what it's worth, as much as I hated the movie as a kid, I was forced to watch it a couple of times. E.T.
E.T.
And I hated that movie. Oh God, I could never sit fucking through it at all. And all it made me want to do is leave the theater and go get some fucking Reese's Pieces.
Well, everyone else is sitting
There's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There was obviously lots of stuff
That was a great movie too.
we were into growing up. Even small things like Bionic Man and Bionic.
Sorry, I can't do that, Hal.
Um,
Bionic Man was awesome.
Renwood says this is a very sad day, or this is sad. Yes, it is. It
Twilight
really is.
Zone. All
Which
sorts
is
of
why-
great sci-fi. Ray Bradbury stuff, short stories were great when I was a kid.
Amazing stories. Twilight Zone stuff also had a little bit of those kind of feels as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to cut off now, and because we could go on talking about Leonard Nimoy for
forever.
a while, and we're going to we're going to stop this hangout right now and get on and start to do our Vikings review from last night. We were originally going to talk about this at the beginning of the review, but we wanted to do our own thing for.
It deserved 5 minutes on its own, or so.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, honestly, it deserves like 6 hours on its own, but.
Yeah, I mean, we could go through every little piece of everything that this guy's done throughout his career.
Just his voice alone.
Oh.
Grown up hearing
Just his
on
voice alone, his mannerisms, the way just the tone, just the way he put his hair as Spock, just everything was so important. And I would say more specifically in the first Star Trek movie because I didn't necessarily love the cameo. I know it's a little hearsay. I didn't love the cameo in the second movie. I thought it was redundant bullshit that we didn't need to hear. It was like, oh, Spock's just telling you not to trust Khan. We could figure that out already.
It was an excuse to put him in the movie, but hey, it's freaking Spock. He wants in, he gets in.
No, I hear that. But let me make my point. I think in the first movie that was a really great performance. And I think that was his last really great performance as Spock, and it really made a big difference to the movie and felt like it was needed there. Whereas in the second movie, maybe it wasn't quite needed.
Yeah. Spock sighting.
It's still beautiful to see. Exactly, still beautiful to see a Spock sighting. So everybody, today, while you can, please check out all those. I know it's easy to just pile it. So if someone died, let's all look up all this stuff. But please post all your Leonard Nimoy thoughts today. We need to celebrate this guy's life, not necessarily be sad about his death, because he lived an amazing 80+ years of making, or at least a big chunk of that, making us happy. So knowing anything that I know about Leonard Nimoy, which isn't knowing him personally, just knowing him through his books and through his work, he would want us to celebrate all the wonderful things he did. Watch a Leonard Nimoy movie today, watch a Star Trek episode, connect to him somehow. That's how you can celebrate his life today. So
please do.
So we're going to cut off right here and get into Vikings, which seems a little less important compared to Leonard Nimoy, but we're going to get into it now. Thank you, everyone, for checking out this video, and please share some of your thoughts about Leonard Nimoy in the comments.
Live long and prosper.
Live long. I can't do it, but live long and prosper.
One hand.